What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Blazers Edge podcast. I am your host, Danny Marang, and, well, I'm joined by my friend, the OG, y'all know him, Washington Post, Ben Golliver. BG, what's going on, buddy?
Not too much, Danny. Does OG stand for old guy or original gangster? Which one are you
I
throwing
think
at me?
we're both flirting with both of them now. I think that's how this works. When that front number changes to a certain number, you get real close to it. So that's how this goes, right?
Yeah, I'm still clinging to what I call the mid-30s. Okay, so don't put me out to pasture yet, Danny. But it's great to chat with you. Obviously, I'm kind of live down here in the weird Disney World bubble. I've been here now for about 2 weeks. I'd say I'm settling in pretty well, all things considered. But it's been a blur, man. It's just been, one of the craziest experiences of my life, I'd say.
I mean, you're only a couple of weeks in. So we'll kind of start with this. I wanted to make sure we had you on because I wanted to have you on, during this whole buildup because you were covering some interesting things. And then when I figured you were heading to the bubble, I'm like, we got to get him on when he's in the bubble, just because there's so few of you guys in the bubble. There's so few people that are there to experience what is should be a once in a lifetime, just crazy. I don't want to call it an opportunity. So experience. I think that's probably a more appropriate word, is experience. What's been kind of, obviously you did an essay for Washington Post, kind of covering everything, but what was just kind of, for anybody who wasn't able to read it, what was the general feeling leading into, and then your first kind of week there where you had to go through a quarantine process was different from what the players have gone through?
For sure. Well, for me, there was a lot of nerves and apprehension about trying to get here. I mean, just so everybody knows, like, I live in LA now, they probably know that, but I was like on a one-man bubble for the last 4 months. I mean, I was locked down basically as paranoid and as tight as you could be, just because of the coronavirus. So I was having all my food delivered. Thankfully, like, all my jobs were cool and everything. So I was in a very privileged position of just being able to just limit all social contact. I wasn't traveling anywhere. I was, basically hardly ever straying outside of about a 2-mile walking radius from my apartment, just trying to ride the thing out, as best I could, always wearing a mask, doing just every possible thing I could do to try to keep myself safe. So it was really like this dream scenario where they're saying, hey, man, you might be able to go cover LeBron and Damian Lillard and Giannis and Zion in a bubble. But the catch is you're going to have to fly across country and, potentially be exposing yourself to the risk of all these players who were testing positive basically day in, day out in the weeks leading up to the bubble. So for me, it was like, all right, well, this is a real catch. It feels like a movie pitch, right? It's like, how much are you really willing to risk to go down there? For me, it was just an incredible, you're talking about opportunity. I mean, for sure, from a career standpoint, it seemed like something that I would have major FOMO if I didn't come down. So I pretty much was all ready to go. But the crazy part is I had to get medically cleared to come down here. And, I've had some, I guess, pre-existing conditions or whatever you want to call it. So I had to talk to all sorts of doctors, my primary care doctor, a cardiologist. I talked to a psychiatrist just to make sure he was comfortable with this whole idea because, the plan was for me to come down here for 94 straight nights. I mean, it's a long time away from, your typical routines and family and everything like that. I talked to experts inside the NBA in terms of medical, people who work for teams who kind of determine whether their teams are going to participate and how they were going to participate. I talked to epidemiologists who had been interviewing for stories over the last couple of months, just trying to make sure everybody thought it was a good idea. And basically everybody gave the thumbs up to the NBA's plan. So I came down here, but I was still paranoid. I made sure I upgraded to first class on my flight. I was like hanging out in the Delta Lounge, 50 feet away from everybody else. I was staying at a nice hotel the first night when I first got here before I could actually check into the bubble. I got a car service. I mean, I'm doing all this bougie stuff that I would never do because I was so paranoid that one connection I could try to, maybe screw everything up. So once I got here, though, they started testing us every single night immediately, right? And, we're getting the swab in our nose, we're getting the swab in our throat. And then the next morning they would send us an email to say, hey, you're negative. So pretty quickly, in that first week, I was stuck only in my hotel room. I couldn't leave. It's a typical Disney room, 2 beds for a family, got a long desk, a little bathroom, hot water, flat screen TV. That's basically all I have here. But once you start to get those positive tests day after day, it gives you this peace of mind. And now you start to feel protected. And now you start to think like, man, I've got better healthcare here than just about everybody in the world. And you have you're kind of happy and relieved, but you're also a
Mhm.
little bit guilty because you're just thinking like, man, every single person in the country should have access to this kind of care and this peace of mind because we're living in such a scary time with the pandemic. And so I feel very fortunate to be here from a career standpoint, but I also feel very safe. And I'll be honest, if I go back to March, April, May, and I was thinking, what could a bubble be like? I didn't think I would feel this safe in it. I thought I was going to be, a little bit more, just freaked out, a little bit, weirded out. But so far so good. And part of that is because nobody's tested positive yet inside the bubble, and I think that's very reassuring to myself, but also to the other players too.
So far, it's got the Ben Golliver seal of approval.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's so nice to be back to work. I mean, that's a big part of it. Like, I was trying really hard to keep a positive mentality throughout the entire shutdown. But Danny, you know this. I mean, I'm doing 5 podcasts a week. I'm trying to write 3 or 4 times a week. The only thing that I know or really care about at this point is basketball from a professional
Yeah.
standpoint. There was no basketball, right? So we're milking the last dance for every last drop that it was worth. We're trying to, cover the meetings and the negotiations and the conference calls with the league and the players union as thoroughly as we possibly could. But it's tough when you don't have games. For this week to be able to go back to a Milwaukee Bucks practice and watch Giannis drain some threes from the corner, be able to see LeBron out on the court throwing lobs to a Dwight Howard, just to be able to cover post-game press conferences where guys are making major social justice stands about Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and everything else. It just felt like a little bit of a return to normalcy. And obviously, it's totally different. And we're going out there in these facilities that are totally empty. The teams are playing, practices in ballrooms that would typically be used for like tacky weddings or like regional sales conferences. I mean, it's like very strange circumstances. The arenas are entirely empty. There's less than 200 people watching LeBron and Luka Doncic go head to head. I mean, it's the fewest people LeBron's probably played in front of since what, 5th grade? He's probably
Probably.
been drawing bigger crowds since he
Yeah.
was a 6th grader, right? So the whole thing is weird, but it does feel good to just kind of get back into your routines, and that's been great.
You touched on it a little bit here, so I want to kind of give folks as much insight into the bubble that you can give here. In that you were in your quarantine process in your room, not in a facility, not locked on like a one property, but a room for a week.
Correct. For sure.
Not
For sure. And you probably saw I was going crazy, right? I mean,
yeah.
I was trying to pace back and forth. I mean, I've been in a real like diet and workout mode during the quarantine. I was trying to figure out how can I spin this, horrible situation into like a personal positive for me, and how can I stay safe. So I was trying to walk 8 miles every single day before I got here. And the last thing I wanted to do was come here and let all that work go out the window. So, I was pacing back and forth in my room 8 paces at a time, trying to get, 5 or 6 miles in during a day. I mean, it kind of started to feel like a little bit of a locker room in here. I'm not going to lie, but it was only me, so I didn't have anything to really worry about there. The only times I had human contact over the course of that week was when they came to test me. They would put Q-tips down my nose and throat. That would take about 30 seconds. They made sure to do that wearing like full medical gear, standing right outside my front, my front door of my hotel room. So I really wasn't able to go further than that. And then they would actually bring 3 meals a day for me, prepackaged meals, and leave it at my front door. And so I would be able to kind of open my door to grab those and bring them back in. I mean, that was it for a week straight. And I had a green bracelet, which basically was like the cue to security that if they saw me out on campus, it wasn't like arrest this man, but it would have gotten me in serious trouble. It would have been like, hey, get back in your room. And by the way, we're notifying the authorities and you're probably going to have to reset your clock and start over. I mean, we saw, Bruno Caboclo have that happen. He left his room during his quarantine period and they basically made him do it over. So those were the stakes for us during that week. It was very strange. Once they let us out, though, man, it was great. Like, you just felt so free, so alive. I was joyous. I mean,
The
my
little things of the
eyes were
world are
like,
much more appreciative.
oh, for sure. And my eyes were so like adjusting to the light because it's so bright and hot down here in Florida. So I was like kind of coming out, sort of like, Shawshank Redemption or something. And one of the first people I saw was Donovan Mitchell. And he's like, welcome to the bubble. And I was like, what is happening right now? Like, what kind of a weird, like, surreal world am I in? But, pretty soon you start to adjust. And it's funny, man. Everyone wants to compare it to summer camp or study abroad. And it's so true. Like, you walk down the little pathway that we have,
Mm-hmm.
and you might see, Scott Foster and Mark Davis, the referees. They might be playing pickleball. You might see JaVale McGee with the fishing pole. Hey, there goes Brad Stevens walking and talking FaceTime, probably, talking to his family back home. I saw Lawrence Frank walking around, doing his thing. The other day happened to jaywalk because I was on my way to pick up a couple packages from the little shipping depot.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, Ed Malloy turns the corner and I'm waiting for him to, call me for some sort of an infraction, like it's just a very surreal thing. So, that part has been really cool. But I also want to just mention, like, we're still in a confined area, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm out of my hotel room, but actually, if you walk the perimeter of the media zone, it's only 0.8 miles all the way around. We've got checkpoints on the far ends, which prevent us from walking into a lot of the areas that the players are able to access. They prevent us from going to the players' hotel. They prevent us from going to a market that sells a bunch of Disney items that the players have access to. There's
That's
guards,
the biggest drawback for you guys, though, really.
For sure, like like they're trying to keep the players as safe as possible.
Yeah.
So I understand it completely. Like they don't want anyone accessing the player hotels if they don't have to be in there, and so that includes the media. So for us, we've got the checkpoints on each side. We've got a parking lot with nothing in it on our backside, and we've got a lake that has signs that say, don't feed the alligators in front of us. Now I've not seen an alligator yet, but theoretically, if we tried to swim over to the players' hotel, we could be, putting our lives in danger. So
they have an actual boat.
Yeah, so those are the confined spaces that we've got to work with right now, and they're slowly opening things up. They said, hey, maybe you could rent some fishing poles next weekend. Maybe you'll be able to get a haircut, certain hours in a week or two. But for right now, they've really limited our lives, and it's all part of their plans and procedures to keep the players as isolated from human contact as possible.
All right, so you were talking about how you guys only have 0.8 miles to kind of work in on the perimeter. When you're moving around the campus, there's 22 teams there. And we were talking before we started, there's less than 15 quote unquote media members. That means there's less than one person to cover each single team that's in the bubble. What is it like to move around the campus? You already talked about, being able to go into the Bucks and see Giannis and see LeBron. It's kind of like everybody there. What is that like having like that many players they're kind of not necessarily at your disposal, but just like you can get to, but you can't get to?
For sure. No, it's super wild because I keep going back to like January with the Lakers and the idea that like when Kobe died, all of a sudden there was like 300 media members at every single availability in practice. We were camping out at the practice facility, waiting for LeBron to speak, waiting for somebody to speak about it. And there's every TV camera, from all over the world coming to there, and you're in a mosh pit. People are elbowing you. Sometimes cameramen are like threatening to fight each other. I mean, it's like a chaotic scene, right? Here, I've been to multiple practices of teams that are like playoff teams, legit playoff teams, and I've been the only person there, right? And their other media are kind of calling in from Zoom, and you're probably doing that on some of these Blazers calls, right, where you get the virtual press conference.
Yeah.
But I would be the only person at the practice. And like for the Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, they dang near won 70 games this year, and there's 3 media members total at multiple of their practices or even at their post-game press conferences, right? So it's just very strange and unusual in terms of the in-person presence. Now, if you look at, say, the Lakers or the Clippers, for example, a typical game for them is still going to draw just about every single media member here. Like their first scrimmage, there was 10 to 12 media members, sitting there courtside watching that thing. I mean, every seat was pretty much filled, right? So I think part of it is that you have to pick and choose. And for me, I've already kind of made peace with this idea that there's going to be teams here who I never even see, right? Like they're going to be gone in 3 weeks, and I'm going to be like, oh wow, like I never even saw the Phoenix Suns play, or like I never even saw them practice, right?
How are you going to throw the
like,
Suns under the bus immediately? Come on now.
Well, I would have said the Wizards, but I'm actually going to watch the Wizards play the Lakers tomorrow, so I'm going to get to see the Wizards. But you kind of get what I mean. Like there's just no way to see all of them, and within a couple weeks, 6 teams will be gone. Within a couple weeks after that, another 8 teams will be gone. So it's too much. Like think about during the playoffs, for example, how crazy it usually feels during a series like, take a typical Blazers series from the past years. I mean, getting to like the Clippers and the Blazers practices, getting to their games, getting to their shoot-arounds, it's exhausting, right? And that's 2 teams in one city. So multiply that by 11, and that's what we're dealing with right now. I mean, they sent out a spreadsheet the first day to all 22 teams practice, right? So you could, like, theoretically, if you were Forrest Gump, you could have tried to get to every single practice, but you would have only been able to stay there for like 2 minutes because you would have had to move on to the next one, right? So It's unlike anything I've seen before. It's crazier than an NCAA tournament where sometimes you get like 4 to 8 teams at a single
Mm-hmm.
regional. I mean, it's even crazier than that. So it's all about your kind of priorities, and I think at least for me from a national perspective, that's meant starting with the
The
true
national
contenders.
storylines, yeah.
Yeah, well, the true contenders, because the teams that we kind of expect to be here in October, and just getting a sense for like how do they feel. I mean, the Clippers, half their team is out, right? Lou Williams did his thing, Montrezl Harrell did his thing. They're kind of coming in and out of the bubble. The Lakers have had some drama with Rondo breaking his thumb. The Bucks have been trying to get Eric Bledsoe back from, his positive test. So there's just been a lot of moving pieces, even among the very best teams here, that we're trying to wrap our minds around.
Tell me, it doesn't seem a little bit strange to say the teams that are supposed to be here around October?
No, it's super weird. I mean, the whole schedule is completely thrown off. I mean, when I first checked in, I got a confirmation email. It said, "Welcome to Walt Disney World Resort. Your 94-night stay has been confirmed." And I was like, wow, that's pretty wild. Like, I've stayed in Vegas for like 30 nights, I think, a few times just because USA basketball, maybe 20, 25
Yeah,
nights.
you did the back-to-back Summer League USA basketball the first time I went down there, and I was like, nah, hard pass.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I'm kind of built for this in a way. I mean, there's a hotel in Oakland that near the Oracle Arena,
Mm-hmm.
before they moved, that I probably stayed in 150 nights over the last 5 years, just because the Warriors are constantly making deep playoff runs. So I'm kind of used to that travel mentality, but not 94 nights in a row. And
No.
clearly they weren't ready for it either, because I got a follow-up email and they're like, "Hey, sorry, we're Disney, we're like $1 trillion corporation, but we've actually never had anyone dumb enough to spend more than 30 consecutive nights at Disney World. So we don't actually have the capability in our reservation system to do a 94-night reservation."
So we got to
So
renew you?
yeah, so I've got 4 separate reservations now to cover my stay here. So that just tells you how absurd this whole thing is, right?
And now there's only going to be a very select few group of media folks that are going to stay the entirety of this. From the other groups, you're going to have guys that are going to come in, do kind of half, and then somebody else rotate in. What do you think is going to be different about being able to experience kind of this entire process? Obviously, the league has talked about opening up things a little bit more as things go along, as more teams go home. How do you think that evolution kind of plays out for you?
Yeah, it would be very interesting. I mean, part of it was just kind of chance on my behalf. We have a smaller staff at the Post covering the NBA than some of the other outlets. So, a lot of the people who are here now will just, trade out halfway through with one of their other staff members who happens to be at home. To me, I think it kind of gives people who stay the whole time an advantage, because there is a real acclimation process. Like, the entire first week you're in quarantine, and then your second week you're just trying to like figure out where everything is. And it was like pretty confusing to find out where the practice is at and how do you get there. There's these shuttle buses we have to take. You have to make sure you're at the right place. You have to make sure you go early. A lot of things are changing last minute because the teams kind of dictate the schedules. So I think from that standpoint, the people who come halfway through, like, it will be very cool for them to get to cover the best parts of the playoffs, the conference finals and the finals. But there's going to be a just kind of a build up and just an adjustment period for them. I think, for me, I think another main advantage is just being able to paint the entire story from start to finish. And I've been covering the bubble idea since March. I think my first story floating a bubble was like less than a week after the league shut down. I think on a podcast I mentioned it like maybe 2 days after, Rudy Gobert tested positive and they suspended the season. I was like, okay, well, here's how I would do it if I was in charge, right? And ultimately, like, you do want to see the story all the way through to completion. So I think I'm kind of happy and feeling very fortunate and blessed that I'm going to have the opportunity, knock on wood, assuming everybody stays healthy, to kind of tell that entire story, because it's a crazy story, man. It's so funny for me too, because I hate science fiction and I don't like Disney World, right? Like, I don't like Disney at all. I haven't seen any of the movies. I don't know any of the characters.
You haven't seen any Disney movies?
I've seen probably 3 Disney movies in my entire life. I just like never got into
What 3 Disney movies have you seen?
Well, that's the thing. I just associate all cartoons with Disney movies, so I wouldn't even be able to tell you, is it truly a Disney movie? I've seen, is Lion King Disney?
Yeah, there you go. There's one.
Okay, I've seen Lion King. I can confirm that. Past that, I saw Bambi when I was a very small kid.
Your parents didn't give you the Disney treatment?
I just think I'm out, man. You know me, I'm a reality-based person. I'm just like too literal. I just want documentaries and I want history stories. Every time I watch a cartoon, I'm just like, this never happened. Like I have a hard time wrapping my mind around it. So for me, like, the Disney part of it and the sci-fi part of it, which a lot of people are like really excited about, I was kind of dreading. And then also like people were like, oh, it's going to be exciting to be in Florida where it's like hot weather, but like LA is like has better weather. It's just not
Yeah.
humid, it's so
You
like
you,
that.
you don't want to kill yourself, basically. Is yeah.
Right. So some of these adjustments that other people were kind of like looking forward to as like positives, I was kind of looking towards as a negative. But ultimately, like if they're able to put basketball on safely, and I get to watch these guys play, and we have these games, that's like my heaven, right?
Yeah.
The other day I was staying 7 hours at a gym, and the back-to-back games that we watched was like Giannis and LeBron and Luca, like over the course
Terrible.
of an afternoon.
Terrible.
What a day! What a day! It's like can you do anything better than that? And I could hear these guys calling out the defensive play coverages. I could hear Frank Vogel telling a referee all Luka does is try to sell calls. We could hear Wesley Matthews, Blazers legend Wesley
Mhm.
Matthews telling a referee that he missed a call probably because, he'd been off for 4 months. He hadn't been doing his job. So he needs to kind of get back into the swing of things. I mean, you just have these like really good moments that, for diehards, it's like a dream,
Just
just
perfect.
scenario. And, it's hopefully it stays that way. Here's the thing though. It feels almost too good to be true. And that it's only like one round of negative or positive tests away from all going away.
Yeah.
There's this very eerie situation where like I'm just constantly crossing my fingers because we're already having so much fun and the basketball is already so fun that like you just don't want it ruined. Like don't spoil this situation. Keep everybody healthy because it just kind of hangs over everything.
Has the Lou Williams situation kind of exacerbated that feeling a little bit?
For sure. Well, and not just him too, but just like, even Richaun Holmes with the
Mhm.
Postmates and, all of that, because, you get this false sense of security and you also get a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, right? Like, it does feel a little bit like we've
Mhm.
been kidnapped by the NBA and like they're in charge and like we have to trust them because they're running everything, right? Like it's not like I could be like, I have my own testing procedure I'd like to do. Like there's no contact to the outside world other than like we can order stuff off of Amazon, basically,
Mhm.
right? So our health is in their hands, and they're doing a really good job at making everybody feel comfortable. But at the same time, you're just like, well, there's really no alternative here, so we kind of have to hope. And that's why when there has been situations like Richaun Holmes or Lou Williams, it's very comforting to know that they're going to take a hard line. They're not trying to bend the rules, and they're continuing to test those guys because if they did try to turn a blind eye to it, it would be very disconcerting. I interviewed Lou Williams like 2 days before he left the bubble, right? If
Mhm.
he had left the bubble and the Instagram hadn't come out and nobody ever knew, I could very easily be interviewing Lou Williams 2 days after he gets back in, and that exposes me, right? So I don't want that kind of a situation, especially because I'm doing things the right way, and most of the people here, by the way, are doing things the right way. The level of mask usage is very, very high. Not 100%, but very close to it. You're seeing players using the wet wipes to wipe things down after practice. You're seeing guys eating. If people are hanging out, they're doing so outdoors. They're staying distanced a little bit. You're seeing a lot of buy-in to the rules and the protocols. And for
Good.
me, I had no idea what to expect when I was coming down here. I'm just thinking, oh, these guys are going to be doing God knows what because they're NBA players and they're just used to being able to, live their lives. And,
Yeah.
and and so far they're bought in, which is great.
Well, that's good to hear. Let's talk about the game product itself, because that's something that's definitely unique here. As you said, you got maybe 200 people in a gym for a game featuring LeBron James or Giannis or Luka Doncic, and that's mind blowing. Like I mean, it's not going to change between the scrimmage and the actual games as far as what the game's going to look like, as far as who's going to be there and what the presentation package is. So, what has this kind of been like being in just kind of the lead up, shoot around, tip off, how coaches are interacting with players, with officials? How has that entire process just kind of transpired for you, like actually being in the building?
Yeah, so I mean, for the first thing is that the arenas feel like TV sets, right? I
Hmm.
mean, this whole thing is made for television. That's the only reason why they're doing this, to get the TV revenue, right? So they have all these bright lights. You feel like you're on a TV soundstage. They've got those video boards in the background, which are definitely trying to appeal to the TV audience and try to downplay the fact that it's in an empty gym. It's very quiet in there, but they do have enhanced sound, so you hear all the sneaker squeaks, and you can hear the players talking and interacting. But also, we're just really close to the court. I mean, that's the part that really stands out. Is like, the basketballs are flying into the media seat during pregame warmups. I'm ready for somebody to go diving to save a loose ball and wipe out a couple of reporters. Like, that's completely possible because we're that level of close to it.
Hmm.
And so it's a fun viewing experience. I think the basketball has actually been better than I expected so far. I just kind of wonder if some of these teams were scrimmaging or kind of getting together before they even got down here, just because the chemistry, like especially from the Lakers, the chemistry was just like really on point. Good defensive rotations, good extra passes, a lot of chatter from these guys. So you just kind of think like, like these guys are definitely ahead of my really low expectations for choppy basketball, given the 4-month layoff. But I also think the star level guys are really locked in. LeBron, Giannis, the Clippers stars. I think they've kind of reached that mental point where it's like, look, these are the terms. Like, we're down here, we're kind of over it. Like, we get it. It's weird, right? But
Hmm.
now it's time to kind of lock in. They're still playing for a title. We're still playing for the contracts. We want to go as deep as possible. These games are going to count for history. So let's go out there and do it. And especially from LeBron, I mean, he feels rejuvenated after the time off. He's not coming into the playoffs after a long grueling season with like huge usage rate like usual. And so I think from definitely from his standpoint and from Giannis's standpoint, it's right back to this idea of like, well, look, there's no fans, sure, we're not in our home arenas, there's no home court advantage, whatever else. Like, we're still competing. It's still me versus you
Yeah.
to see who gets to be the best player. And I think that part has settled in very quickly. I mean, these guys are just like, I'm excited to be back to business, like I said earlier. The players are very excited to be back in business.
I'm going to hit you with the question. It's the dumb question, but I think it's one that it changes depending on who you're talking to and how they're looking at things. And you said how this is going to reflect in kind of the annals of history. Does a champion have an asterisk here?
Well, I mean, look, what's the point of an asterisk if you're not going to have it to use on the weirdest season in NBA history?
Hmm.
So, like, I mean, and this is the context. The NBA has crowned a champion every single year since 1947. So like, one argument is, what's the only thing worse than an asterisk is a blank spot next to 2020 champion.
Hmm.
So I think from that standpoint, I am really, really hoping that they're able to provide a resolution so that all these players who have worked so hard get the payoff of somebody winning. Um, I do think that if you get a team that people don't expect winning this, if you get a team crippled by the coronavirus where they have to forfeit or half the rosters out of the rotation and they wind up getting upset, I think that's going to open up the opportunity for excuses and for people to say, hey, look, you're going to have to prove this in a regular season and we don't really buy it. I think if you're a guy who's never won before, if you're Giannis, if you're James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Jokic, and somehow those teams wind up winning the title, I think they're going to face more of that asterisk talk, the second guessing.
Hmm.
I think if you're LeBron, if you're Kawhi, you've done it in multiple locations, with multiple teams. This would be, your third different team, for both of those guys if they win it. I think that they would face less of that stuff. But ultimately, like, we have a long way to go to October, and I do think that this reality will set in for people. If the basketball is a high quality and everybody stays healthy, I do think that's going to kind of help validate what the result would be. But for sure, people are going to look back on 2020 for all time and say, hey, look, that was just a different year. They didn't play 82 games. There was a long break in the middle of it. They didn't invite all the teams back. There was only 22 teams. They added a play-in round, which they had never done before. They played in empty arenas. There was no home court advantage. Some people left the bubble. Some people never even showed up because they weren't comfortable. Like, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances that are going to wind up contributing to that conversation. Me personally, I am hopeful that they can crown a champion that is validated by everyone. But I'm also a little bit suspicious about whether casual fans will view it that way.
Come on, you gotta give the casuals a little more credit than that. You don't have to. We'll hit you with a couple listener questions. We'll get you out of here. You got to get a heart out and get back to work. First one from Team Mom, my former co-host, Tara Bone Biggs.
Oh,
All right,
I
man.
miss Tara. How's she doing?
She's doing good. She's enjoying her freedom now. So she's free from me for the time being. She wants to know this is an interesting question. This is Tara's good for these. That's for damn sure. If you could transport any team from any other era into the bubble to cover, which team would it be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think my mind first goes to the 96 Bulls, that 72-10 team. Remember we saw him on The Last Dance coming into that season on a mission. Jordan was so pissed that, he lost the Magic after coming back from baseball that he punches Steve Kerr in training camp. You're just talking about, the greatest player of all time at the peak of his powers, wearing the Jordan 11, setting all the cultural trends, having those kind of interpersonal dynamics where he's just, furious with his teammates, trying to coach them up, lead them to a title, because it was a whole new cast of characters after he had left for, baseball. On top of that, you get Rodman trying to deal with the quarantine rules. I mean, that would be, probably a 3-hour movie in and of itself. Plus, you get Pippen as, another all-time great. Phil Jackson, the Zen master, adapting all of his principles to this crazy quality of life aspect here at Disney World. And I bet, to be honest, I bet if there's anybody who hates the idea of Disney more than me, it's probably Phil Jackson. So I'd love to get some of his rants about, what's going on with Disney and why do we have to be down here and all that. So I think it's kind of an obvious answer. Sorry to, to be so, textbook, Tara, but that's the team for me.
It's allowed. I thought you might try to sneak in like Gilbert Arenas Wizards. I thought that might be, a little Javaris Crittenton, I mean, if we're talking about interesting, I mean, that'd be an interesting team to cover down there. That's for sure.
Well, just like I don't want anyone, leaving for strip club or for Postmates, I really don't want to encounter any guns at the happiest place on earth. Okay. The risk factors, I don't want any of that. I want the distractions to a minimum. I want the basketball and maybe the soap opera around the basketball part of it. That's what I'm really.
Not the real life soap opera.
Yeah, no. Let's just keep, any firearms away from me as far as possible.
Is there, you said, speaking of breaking quarantine, is there a food out there that you would just pay an exorbitant amount of money for to have it delivered to the bubble for right now?
Well, I didn't last more than 48 hours before I ordered 64 ounces of peanut butter because my body was going through protein withdrawal because for the first couple of days I didn't have the vegetarian friendly menu. So the only protein that they were giving me was protein I didn't want to eat. So I ordered just a vat of peanut butter, and that has sustained me very, very well. I mean, the quality of the meals does vary here a little bit from day to day, especially from a vegetarian standpoint. So having that just like a lot of peanut butter on deck at all times has been very helpful. In terms of like what, the meals that I probably miss the most, that's tricky. I'm like a big Thai food guy. And, I'm just kind of thinking of like the meals that I eat when I'm at home. Like if I order out, I get a lot of Thai food. We haven't really had any Thai here. It's probably the longest I've gone without Thai food in a long time. So, if you're telling me I can get, some Penang curry, and some veggie rolls and some nice brown rice and some peanut sauce. I mean, add all that up. That's starting to sound pretty good, Danny. You're tempting me.
All right. This is one that I got from a couple people. How many movies did you watch during your week-long quarantine? And what movies did you watch?
I didn't watch, I'm not sure I watched a single movie during quarantine. I did watch a bunch of Money Heist. I'm on to season 3 of that show on Netflix. And I love heist movies. And also I was mentioning Stockholm Syndrome earlier. Like the whole show is about Stockholm Syndrome. So it was like very apt. I'll tell you that quarantine was unlike anything I've ever been through. I think I did more than 30 interviews, whether it was podcast, radio, TV, just about the experience. Cause I put a couple of videos of myself kind of going stir crazy in the hotel room. And I think, a lot of people wanted me to just recount my misery, to their audiences,
Absolutely.
So, I found myself like right in the middle of that media storm. So that's how I pretty much spent most of quarantine, that and just writing a lot, just trying to set the stage of what it's like down here. It's almost like we're doing diary entries practically, in terms of this experience, because there's so much fascination about it. So that's kind of how I passed the time during quarantine, and also FaceTime too. I was I had a lot of loved ones checking in on me. Let's just put it that way. I think people were, like they saw the video of me planking and they're like, "Uh-oh, this guy, this guy might be losing it. Let's make sure we do some wellness checks."
Yeah, the one where you posted your steps on your watch, I think that's when I texted you.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that because I think I got, what was my record? Maybe like 17,000 steps within a hotel room in one day. I mean, that
Yeah,
sounds
I
just,
think the one you put up was like 13.4, and I was like,
ooh.
"Ooh, what are we doing here, dude?"
I know it was. You weren't alone. Let's put it that way. But everybody needs to know I'm doing fine, and there's no hostage situation here. They're not forcing me to say that. I can take a picture of myself, next to the paper, the newspaper,
Get
to
your
let
proof of
everybody know
life.
I'm still alive. I'm doing great.
All right, what's the one thing you wish you would have brought with you besides the peanut butter?
Wow, that's well. So I've already made some purchases on that front too. So once I got here, I realized that like 94 days is no joke, and like I
Mm-hmm.
really needed to have a home office set up like I do at home because I'm just pulled in a lot of directions from a work standpoint. I obviously I write, but I also take photos. I go for my stories. I take videos that sometimes go for my stories, go for social media. I'm doing a whole bunch of podcasts, as you know. So that is just kind of an intense work environment. I've got a good setup at home. So some of the first things I bought, I got like an external monitor just so I have two screens. I can work a little bit more efficiently. I got a wireless keyboard and mouse. This was stuff that was going to be like hard to transport on a flight.
Yeah.
So I've got that just to be a little bit more efficient. One of my podcast listeners was nice enough to send me a really nice mic stand. So I've got a little like home studio podcasting vibe going on in my hotel
Nice.
room. That was pretty much my first round of upgrades. The other splurge item, though, it's very, textbook, very almost like, a self own. But I got a really fancy Lego Lamborghini kit. So I'm going to be building this like crazy Lamborghini. It's like 5,000 pieces. It's probably going to take me 2 months to do. So that's going to be like my main diversion activity when I'm here, is putting this thing together. And I have two beds in my hotel room. Obviously, like no overnight visitors allowed. There's no roommate situations. So I've turned that second bed into my Lego building station. So I'm
Oh, okay.
looking forward to that here as things slow down a little bit.
Are you a glue the Legos guy together?
No, I've thought about that in certain situations, and I've definitely had disasters where I've accidentally like dropped transporting the Lego from one place to another and had it shatter. But no, I'm not a glue guy. I'm old school. I'm traditional. And ultimately, like once I build this thing, I'm probably going to have to take it apart to travel home at some point. So I don't want to glue it because then it's like, do I need like a seventh checked bag to get back home?
Gotta just put it in the FedEx box and ship it home, man. All right, well, we'll let you get out of here on that one. Thanks for coming on, man. I hope everything goes well. Stay safe. All the things. It's crazy to hear, how everything's kind of going down there for you and everything that is kind of coming your way as far as what to expect and what that world is. Any last thoughts, pearls of wisdom, or insights from inside the bubble?
Not really. I would just say, like, obviously, thanks to all the Blazers Edge listeners and the Blazers Edge readers over the years. This is one of those experiences where, like, I felt very, very lucky to be kind of selected and to have a company like the Post be willing to spend. I mean, it was $54,000 to
Mm-hmm.
send me down here, which is just an insane amount of money and a major commitment, and that covers the room and the board and the testing and all that stuff. But I just feel very, very lucky, and like there's a 0% chance I ever would have had this opportunity without Blazers Edge. So I think that's kind of been on the front of my mind here as you're doing a lot of reflecting, even before before the bubble. Just like the COVID pandemic just kind of
Mm-hmm.
makes everybody step back and think. And so I think that was definitely on my mind for sure. It's just like it's been a crazy ride covering this sport. This is the weirdest experience I'm probably ever going to get to have as a reporter. I mean, even if I'm lucky enough someday to cover an Olympics or cover whatever the other big things are out there that people want to cover, this is right up there in terms of just like surreal vibe plus just randomness plus the goofy factor and everything else. So I'm just feeling very blessed and thankful and glad for good health for myself and my family members. And I hope that the same is out there for you and all your listeners too. I hope everybody's staying safe. And, I appreciate their support going all the way back to 2007, if you can believe it.
Yeah, it goes back just a little ways. Go ahead and plug anything you got coming up, man.
No, I just tell people, if you want to follow along to what I'm writing or what I am, what I'm talking about on a regular basis, the two best places would be, WashingtonPost.com. There's an annual subscription right now for $29, which is a ridiculous deal.
That's a good deal.
The election's coming up and everything else. I mean, if you're able to do that, like, send me a little receipt. I know a lot of people have been subscribing recently. I love to see that on social media. I'm glad to reshare that as a show of my gratitude. And I'm also doing, 2 extended podcasts a week. Greatestofalltalk.com. That's my subscription podcast with Andrew Sharp. And that's where we really get into the nitty gritty of the bubble life. So if you haven't subscribed there, consider doing it. And I'm still doing an open floor podcast as well with Sports Illustrated. So people can subscribe to that on Apple Podcasts. It's free, twice a week, give and takes on, the basketball environment here and what life is like and all that stuff too. So that's how people can follow. It's and Twitter at Ben Golliver, Instagram at Ben.Golliver.
All right. Thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you. Stay safe. Stay away from the alligators. Make sure you get your protein. We'll check in with you again here in a couple of weeks. All right, brother?
That sounds perfect. I'm going to make a to-do list. It says Danny's rules, and I'm just going to follow every single one of those. It's perfect. I'll be right on track.
I'm sure they'll do wonders for your life. I guarantee it.
I love it. All right, man. Take care.
You too, brother.